Hello. For the last 7 days, it has been the Listen Now week, which is an initiative, a terrific initiative by Tobin Brothers around suicide awareness. We have heard from our ambassadors that it's been a very tough topic to talk about at times, but a very necessary one because I think everyone that I've talked to agrees that the silence around suicide just does not work. And we wanted to do the last day with a bit of a wrap up and a chat about, how we think it all went. We've got Managing Director of Tobin Brothers Funerals, James MacLeod here, Jacqui Louder, psychologist, and from the Salvation Army, Major Brendan Nottle. Hello to the three of you. Thank you for the chat.
Thanks, Justin.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Good to be here.
James, I want to start with you. I mean, we spoke about this last Sunday, but the reason behind this initiative, you still feel the same way about it after this week?
I think I feel stronger about it than ever, Justin. And suicide's been real. It's been real for a long time. It hasn't been spoken about. And I guess if I can share that this week I've fielded several calls of people who wanted to speak to me directly here at Tobin Brothers, and they're all families who've experienced suicide in their families. And they rang to essentially say thank you for opening up the conversation and around it. One lady said to me that she had a friend that hadn't spoken to her for a number of years, and said that her friend reached out to her this week. Oh. And she heard the interviews, etc., etc. So for me, that's suggesting that, we're getting the conversation, we're opening the conversation up, and I think that's a real positive, and I really felt, so happy for those families that had felt that they'd had people open up to them and felt that they could now more freely talk about it as a result of the campaign this week.
And Brendan and Jacqui, how do you feel the week has gone? I mean, you've looked at those interviews and listened to what the ambassadors have said. How are you feeling about it?
I think for me, James is seeing it at one end and I'm probably seeing it a little bit at the other. And certainly the intensity has gone up in the last probably 5 weeks in terms of what I'm seeing as one practitioner, and my colleagues are as well. I think the genuineness and the openness of the stories have made it such a nice week, to be honest, because I think my big feeling as a psychologist with suicide is that it seems to be the one form of death that cops judgment.
Yes. Yeah.
For all the wrong reasons. So I think that for me has probably been highlighted through all the different stories. And I think when you've got people who have experienced this in their own families, the power in those stories has been really beautiful.
Brendan, what were your thoughts?
I was concerned, Justin, as the week went on, that this fantastic initiative by Tobin Brothers was going to be hijacked politically. And what I mean by that was there was a whole lot of discussion happening about whether the numbers of people committing suicide had increased during COVID or decreased or remained the same. That's actually not the debate that we need to be having.
No.
The reality is we have to be having a discussion about the reality that the environment that we're currently living in is absolutely ripe for people to consider taking their lives.
But this was this is a point I made yesterday. This is something that was happening well before COVID as well anyway. And our concern is that it's going to continue after COVID. COVID's not going to help, and that's the bleeding obvious, isn't it? But I mean, the problem of suicide, all three of you have had the shocking, you've been at the shocking front end of seeing just how bad things have been in recent times with suicide.
You look at the family court, Justin, are reporting that between March and July this year, they've had a 200% increase in the number of relationships that are coming to an end.
Yeah.
You look at the Australian Drug Foundation, they're running a campaign at the moment because they're really concerned that alcohol use in the home has increased significantly during COVID. You listen to the police, they indicate to us that domestic violence reports have increased significantly. Unemployment's gone up. Small businesses have either gone to the wall or at risk of going to the wall. All of these circumstances indicate that many people will stop and think that suicide is an option. And so what James and Tobin brothers have done is absolutely timely and absolutely the right thing, because it's saying, hang on, let's stop. Let's really check in on each other. And just a simple phone call can be sometimes the thing that's needed to make a person realise that they're cared for and they're appreciated and valued.
They're loved.
Or
They're
that
loved.
phone call and loved.
Yeah.
Or that phone call could be the thing that directs people to professional support that, you know, people may well be in desperate need of.
Jacqui, the big one for me that I felt is that, and I sort of realised this, I'm sure, you know, you're well ahead of me on this, but I realised that because we didn't talk about suicide, that if somebody was feeling suicidal, if they were making a plan and they were thinking about it, because it's not talked about, they didn't know how to raise it. They didn't know how to say, I'm thinking of killing myself, because it was so taboo. And as we know, they're not asking for that help. They don't get it, and they could take their own life. Do I have that right when I feel that?
Yeah, and I think what people don't realise, that there's a lot of myths around suicide, and you know that they'll just go and do it, they won't talk about it. Well, that's actually not what happens. Like, most of the time, they will talk to family and friends to give an indication they're not doing so well. And I think in one of the interviews you did this week with John and Sue, I think John made the comment that he said, there's fear around this until someone explains it to you. And I think that comment, out of all of the interviews, and I've watched them all, probably highlighted exactly why we're doing this, is because we have to take the fear away. We have to take the judgment away and understand that people are reaching out, and it's about having a conversation. And the other thing that I've always pushed from my messages is that you have to be responsible with your communication with somebody. If I ask you, how are you? I have a responsibility to stay there and listen to that answer. Yeah. And I think that's, to me, where we miss a lot of our day-to-day ability to pick up things, is we ask questions and we don't stop and listen. And that's why listen now is such an important message.
Yeah, yeah. Because it's, how are you? Well, I'm crappy, as a matter of fact. Oh, okay, well, I'll see you later. You know, that, you know, we sort of hear those conversations with people all the time. Brendan, you spend a lot of time talking with many different people. Have you ever seen it like this, you know, in recent times? Again, not to talk about COVID necessarily, not necessarily about COVID, but have you ever seen it this bad?
No, honestly, I haven't. It's really interesting, Justin. We're hearing, you know, the statistics are indicating that suicide has not increased, but anecdotally, it feels like it's definitely increasing. I talk to people that are homeless, people that are doing it really tough, and they tell me about stories where just over the past couple of months, they know of people that have taken their lives. Police are indicating the same thing to us. I've got a friend who said the owners of three small businesses in the southeast of Melbourne have taken their lives. So anecdotally, it feels like I actually feel like I'm surrounded by suicide at the moment. That's how intense it is.
And it's not. We don't want to turn it into a numbers game anyway. I mean, yes, we've got to look at statistics. So, I think, James, the thing that came out of the coroner speaking late in the week about suicide, and said that the numbers had not increased. You know, we won't debate that. But one thing that came out of that is they're going to change the way the numbers are put out. I think, you know, with the three, I'll start with James, but with the three of you, welcome that.
Look, I think from our perspective, I've really welcomed the announcement by the State Coroner, John Kane. He, from where I sit, has been the first coroner certainly in my lifetime in the funeral industry that has spoken so openly about suicide. And I think he wants to. He feels the community needs to talk and have more open conversations about it. And his announcement this week that he'll be releasing the suicide statistics, the numbers, each and every month moving forward, means that everyone concerned, health professionals especially, people putting funding into mental health, etc., can make informed decisions. In the past, we've been dealing with the statistics, which are often 18 months old, from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, the nationwide statistics, and this gives us real live data, and I really welcome the announcement by the coroner and salute him for this new initiative.
Jacqui, what do you think?
I mean, I feel exactly the same, because my question would be, what are we achieving by not being honest here? I don't think we're actually able to move things forward if we're not being honest. And I think, you know, the stories this week, whether it be, you know, from Joe, who's a farmer who feels guilty because he survived, and has lived through his experience, or whether you take it to parents who have lost a child, or whatever, is we also have a responsibility to the people that have lost family members, because they feel guilt as a loved one. You feel like you should protect your loved ones, and they carry a lot of guilt with them. And I think it's not only about saying this is a problem that we need to be addressing and we all have a responsibility for, but it is also highlighting how many people we need to take care of that are going through this.
Yeah. But Brendan, how do you think we're going to go with that reporting the numbers every month? Is that a positive move?
I absolutely feel that it's a positive move, because what it does is it opens up the conversation around suicide. But I think what it also does is it addresses, I think, an entrenched issue that's been in our community for a long time, and that is we often determine the way we reflect on a person's life by the way they die. So if a person takes their life, we often say, well, we can't talk about the life that they lived, even though it may have been a beautiful life and one that we want to celebrate. And so I think this idea of bringing suicide out into the open and discussing it more openly is a really important thing in terms of helping us celebrate the whole of a person's life, which I think is critical.
Jacqui, as we move forward now, if we're going to get these figures every month, and there's going to be, for want of a better term, news stories out of that, you know, we're going to see the media and people talking about, oh, suicide. You know what we've seen with COVID. You know, oh, the cases are up, the cases are down. It's something that we talk about more. So as we start to talk about suicide more, particularly with the media, you know, how do we need to have that discussion? How do we need to report the cases, talk about it, you know, and get it right? How do we do that?
I think for me, there's a couple of things. Number one is that language and words actually matter. And they're very powerful. And I think that's probably the most important thing. And I think within that, it's about authenticity with what we're talking about. I think it's about curiosity, asking questions. You can't tell me there's no questions. Ask the questions. Someone has an answer, or we can work through those answers. I think it's about trying to be as impartial as we can in the way we approach this, to be able to look at all sides without that judgment. And I think if we can do that, then that's just, it's going to give us so much more information, and it's so much more ability to care for everyone.
But Brendan, how would you like to see us talk from now on with these new figures?
Well, I think what it does, Justin, is reminds us that there are a number of steps back before a person really seriously takes their life, where we as a community, we as friends, we as family, work colleagues, neighbours, can actually get into that space and have conversation. Exactly what Jacqui is talking about before. And I think those very simple conversations, those very simple messages that we're concerned about a person, we care about them, we value them. Gosh, they're profound messages that can be enough to actually take that person off that track of suicide and put them onto another track, a more positive track. So I think opening up dialogue, not just at the point of crisis, but way before that, is absolutely critical.
Yeah, the one that upset me, there were a lot there, but Jodie Ledisky, when she, from the Forensic Institute of Medicine, talking about seeing those younger people, or not necessarily younger, but people just shouldn't be gone. They just should not be dead, and just having them in front of her and turning up for work every day. James, I know that you can relate to this very well, but turning up to work every day and just sort of, for want of a better term, a body is there that just should not be there. God, it's heartbreaking. It's just...
I think it might have been Joe in his one in the very first interview, and he said it's not about people's achievements, it's actually about how someone feels. And I think so much of our talking around this, when we hear stories about suicide, it's but they had so much to live for and they had this and that. And he took all that away. He said, it's not about that.
No.
It's actually about how are they feeling right now. And he really simplified it. And those sort of messages, they are so invaluable, because most people, it's like we're trying to convince someone to live. And that's not what suicide is about. It's about trying to let everybody know we care, we are here to listen, and we will help you walk through this as a community, whether that's your community of your family or your workplace or the wider community. It's about making sure that we look after each other and how people feel.
And if you're worried about somebody, I mean, how do you? It's not easy, but it's an easier way to say, look, how are you going? You're feeling all right? You know, is there something you want to talk about? But if you really suspect that they're having suicidal thoughts, that's a very tough one to broach too, because a how are you is just not going to cover it, is it?
No, but it's I think for the person asking the question, it's okay to feel very uncomfortable with the conversation. That's okay. I think then it's also about saying, not needing to fix it. It's not your job to fix it. That's not your job. Is care. In that moment, it's about caring. And the way you do that is sometimes just saying, if you get a response that you go, I do not know what to do with this, is just say, can I just stay with you, please? Can I stay with you? And let's try and think about this. And we won't be able to work through this, just the two of us, but let me just stay with you for the moment so that I can care for you.
Telling people that they're loved and needed is it needs to almost be repeated, doesn't it? If for somebody who is in that state, Brendan, you know, you'd think that, you know, they've got to really feel that until they come back. You know?
Absolutely, and I think often what happens is this is a generalisation, but it's not one sort of lack of a sign of being loved or cared for that's going to trigger suicidal thoughts in a person. It's a whole series of those moments, and so if we can break that by actually engaging with people and a whole range of people actually engaging with that individual and just reminding them authentically and genuinely that they're cared for, they're loved, they're appreciated, it starts to de-escalate that person's feelings of not being wanted anymore. And I think those sorts of things are really critical. And it just says to all of us in the community, we've all got a role to play. So the experts, the people with the expertise, they absolutely have a role to play, but so do we, just in doing those simple things in caring.
James, I congratulate you very much for putting this together. This was your initiative and Tobin Brothers' initiative to do it. As I said last Sunday, now somebody might be thinking, oh, look, this is a little strange for a funeral company to be doing this. But to be honest, as the week goes, and I never thought that, but as the week goes on, the more and more I think you are the perfect people because you understand, you've seen the families. You are caring for those people, and you have seen the destruction that suicide can bring on people.
Yeah, and one of the things that we're on about at Tobin Brothers is we talk about life all the time, and this life is what we're talking about here. And I'm a father. I've got 2 kids, and I've got a large family. I've seen struggles close to me. And sadly, I've seen the end of the line too with families who have lost loved ones, and you see their struggles, and if you see them and run into them years on and what have you, they're still struggling. And anything that we can do to assist in these conversations, in reaching out to each other, as Jacqui and Brendan have so beautifully put. That's got to be a positive, and we want to be talking about the living, and so people can have long and fulfilled lives, and the bit that we can do as a good community citizen to raise this conversation and this awareness. We're happy to be part of such an initiative.
Yeah, well done. You should be very proud of yourself and your team. Brendan and Jacqui, I'd love to just get a final word from you, if I could, about what you want people. Jacqui, I'll start with you. What you want to take away, you want people to really take away from this week.
I think what I would like people to take away from this is about staying connected, creating those compassionate communities where we're prepared to talk. I think it's also about recognizing we're all going to experience this differently, and we've got to be in it for the long term. And whilst there is discomfort, there's a heap of learning, but you feel good when you can care for somebody. So don't be afraid to care. Don't think you have to have all the answers, but just start the conversation, because other people can jump in along the way.
And Brendan, for you, any last thoughts? What do you want people to know?
I think the really important thing, Justin, is never ever assume that anyone, no matter who they are, is okay and is immune to thoughts of taking their life. Because the reality is that all of us at some stage can just feel that sense of being really overwhelmed by what's going on. And I think sometimes I do it myself, there's certain types of people that would never consider suicide, and how wrong I am when I make that assumption. So I think it's important to always look for opportunities to check in with the other person, no matter who they are.
Well, thank you very much, the three of you. And right along the bottom there right now are the Lifeline numbers. Write them down, have them. If there's someone you think needs them, or if you need it yourself, please make use of it. All the videos from during the week, all the interviews and all the ambassadors are there on tobinbrothers.com.au. If you follow the hashtag as well, listen now, you'll find it on all the other social media. This is not something that should be there just for the week, but it should be something that really continues.